ladies and frogs, and welcome back to another video. Okay, so this is a video idea I've had basically since I started my YouTube channel, and it's called the One Layer Challenge, which is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, I am not allowed to use more than one layer for my art, which is super difficult because if you know me, you know that I am a layer hoarder. I make a new layer for almost every line I draw while I'm drawing digitally, so this challenge was pretty difficult to say the least. So as you can see right here, to start off, I started off with like a super rough sketch, and initially I was going to sketch out a few different poses and kind of figure out what I wanted to do, but I kind of just fell in love with the first pose, so I decided to go with that one. And I didn't really have an idea for like what design or what character I was going to use, so I was going into this completely blind. I've had a mental image in my head for the past few days of a character that I really want to design and draw out, and this kind of resembles her, and I had the plan to kind of try and use that image in my brain to design this character, but I strayed a little bit from the image in my head. And then also one issue I had with this challenge was the anatomy and the pose, because I am so heavily reliant on finding pose references and using references off of Pinterest and stuff, but I have been trying to grow out of that because it's gotten to a point where I literally can't draw unless I have a pose reference for the drawing that I want to do. So if you notice like any anatomical errors in this, literally shut up. Don't say anything. Don't say anything. I don't want to hear it. One thing I was really hesitant about when I started my YouTube channel was the fact that I move my canvas a lot, and I'm sure you've noticed that already. So I apologize for all the movement. Oh, and one thing I'm really upset about is while I was drawing this, I sketched out a corset for her to wear and ended up losing that in the final product. Very upset about that. I think it just kind of got blended in with all the colors and I kind of forgot that it existed. There were actually a lot of things that I sketched out that didn't make it into the final cut, and I'm kind of salty about it, but what are you gonna do? And then finally we start going under the colors, and I really didn't have an idea for what kind of color palette that I wanted to use. I was straight up winging this entire piece, not a single idea beforehand, it just went right into it. I do know that I kind of have a comfort palette, which is just like a select handful of colors that I go to when I don't have any other ideas, which tends to be kind of restricting for my art because I feel like I use these same handful of colors a lot, but that's none of my business. Surprisingly, I didn't use a lot of yellow in this piece because yellow is my favorite color and I tend to incorporate it in almost every piece of artwork that I can, but I ended up going with a very warm palette for this entire design. And you start to really see like how inexperienced I am with drawing like this, because typically at this point in a normal drawing I would have started using the select tool and copy and pasting layers and changing the opacity on different things and stuff like that, but obviously I can't do that with this challenge. So one main example of this is the eyes, where typically at this point I would use the select tool and copy and paste any portion of the eye that was under the hair and then change the opacity so you could still see the expression under the bangs, but I couldn't for the life of me figure out how to do that with this challenge. So my girl has no eyebrows and I end up kind of just completely scrapping the eyes and the transparency and everything later on. Also, I should probably say that her eye color and her kind of color palette in general was heavily inspired by Alberto Scorfino from Luca, because I have watched it almost 3 times so far. I love that movie. I would die for Alberto. One thing I really did like about this challenge was being able to do this kind of free line art style. I don't really tend to do this a lot. I tend to just finish my line work, you know what I mean, with like the completed lines and stuff, but with this I could kind of pick and choose where I wanted the lines to go because I colored before I did the line art, which isn't something I really do. Also, little pause in the art commentary. I'm sorry if I like stutter or pause a lot or say I'm not currently reading off of a script, which is something that I did for my first few videos, and I would love to apologize for it, but I don't really care. I did not have the energy to write out a whole script for this video. Anyways, back to commentating. This part was really difficult for me because I couldn't figure out how to get around the fact that I couldn't use a clipping mask. I'm also going back in and trying to thin out some of the line work because I noticed it started to get a little chunky from having to go over it again and again so many times. And then I noticed that my shading was looking a little too desaturated because of the fact that I wasn't using like an overlay layer, so I went in with some red on the lips and like kind of around the face to just try and make it look more alive. Also, really dumb of me to be going in with the liner this early on, but I was just excited to see how it looked. And then this bandana was probably like one of my favorite things to draw. I use yellow so often that I was already pretty comfortable with what colors I would need to shade with it and stuff like that, because when I don't use an overlay layer, my shading tends to look pretty desaturated and kind of like gray. But obviously you can tell I just went in with like a darker orange color, and I don't know, I think it turned out pretty good, so pretty happy with the way that part turned out. I did debate for a little while on whether or not I should try and incorporate a pattern into the bandana, but I decided against it because I'm lazy. But I did decide to incorporate a pattern into a different part of the outfit later on because I got like my second wind. Oh yeah, and then this part right here where I was re-watching the video, I realized how giant the hand on her stomach is. I did not realize that while I was drawing. I didn't even realize that in like the final product. I think just watching it back made me realize how ginormous it looks, so we're not going to even talk about that. We are, however, going to talk about the save on this shading. You saw that I just went back and I was trying to desaturate it a little bit because it looked way too harsh against the red color. I think for the most part I kept the shading relatively simple on this, just because, like I said earlier, I'm lazy. Prime example number one, I just colored in this whole arm piece the same color as the line art so I wouldn't have to shade it. I also didn't use a straight up black for the line art. I used kind of like an off purple-ish color. It's like a darker version of her hair. I don't know, I thought it would just make it look a little better. And then at this point, I started off with her belt, and I noticed that I was kind of starting to get the hang of it more, and starting to realize like what order I needed to do everything in. Definitely not a professional, but it's probably better than what I would have been able to do at the beginning of this. Keep in mind, at this point, I was probably an hour and a half into this piece, and I was so tired. I was kind of just on autopilot at this point, trying to finish the piece. And throughout the entire process, I was kind of trying to figure out what pants I wanted to give her. I was originally going to give her like a dark black or something, but I decided on going camo because this is around the time I started to get a little more energetic and I was getting a little more confident in my process. So I decided to, spice it up a little bit. Worst decision I could have ever made. This was probably the most time-consuming part of the entire piece. I'm not like an expert on patterns or anything. I had a reference for camouflage pulled up on my other iPad, and then I kind of got into the zone and my other iPad died. So you can kind of see where I start to just wing it. One of my main ideas behind drawing the camouflage was I thought maybe I could take a shortcut and not have to shade the pants if there was a pattern on it, because I figured it would be less noticeable that there was no shading on them if there was like a pattern to distract you from that. At this point I was like super tired and just ready to like finish, but I don't think I did too horrible. Honestly, this isn't the very first time that I've drawn camouflage, but it's definitely the first time in like years that I've done it. And then I totally almost lost this pocket, so I had to go in and kind of redraw the camo. That was like mildly annoying, but it was my own fault for not putting that there beforehand. And then as far as like the back leg goes, I tried to incorporate a little bit of shading just by using like the darker versions of whatever colors I had on the front leg. It was kind of like darker and more saturated, which might have been the issue because I've been thinking that that leg looked a little off. But it's fine. It was like 3 in the morning. I was just vibing, watching Drawing with Waffles in the background. I've honestly been really inspired to draw for the past couple days because I've been on kind of like a Drawing with Waffles binge. And she draws a lot of traditional art, which is something that's pretty hard for me recently. But she's kind of made me want to get back into it a little more. So, I don't know, we'll see. If I post any traditional videos, you know who to thank for that. And then here I go finishing up the line work for the pants, and I remember feeling so accomplished when I did that. I felt like they looked really good. I was really proud of the way they turned out, and I was really excited to do the boots because not only were they the last part of this drawing, but I also wanted to try and see if I could make them look like leathery, like combat boots, without having to do some really hard shading for them. And I don't know, in a second you'll see how that turned out. One type of artist I envy are the types of artists that can draw extremely detailed and complex shoes. I will never understand how you guys do that. So then once I finished with the boots, I went in and started highlighting the hair, and then after that I realized that there were a couple chains that I forgot on her pants that I decided to finish up really quick. I still don't understand how I forgot her necklaces because her necklaces were also chains, but I don't know, that's none of my business, I guess. And I really wanted to call it done at that point, but I realized that the chains didn't really look like chains, so I decided to add a little highlight, and I figured from far away you won't even be able to notice. And then I just went in and started erasing the lines from my original sketch, which wasn't too hard because I was kind of doing that along the way anyways. And then I decided to just add a really simple background. Why I chose pink, absolutely no clue. It was a very spur of the moment idea. I originally wasn't even going to use a background, but I felt like it didn't look finished without one. And then towards the end, I did kind of cheat. I did use 2 layers only to add my overlays and effects onto the piece. But as far as the entire drawing itself goes, I only used 1 layer. And I'm honestly not too mad about the way it turned out. I think it's pretty good for my first attempt. I might try and do this challenge again in the future. Other than that, I hope you guys enjoyed. Please like and subscribe and comment if you have any other challenge ideas I should do. And I will see you guys next week. Bye!